The war camp was alive with the sounds of laughter. Deep within the Dominion's forward operating base, alien soldiers gathered around a roaring fire, their voices echoing into the night, carrying through the cold, oxygen-thin air of the occupied world. The soldiers were Kragath, a species of towering reptilian warriors, apex predators of their homeworld. Bred for war, hardened in battle, they had crushed rebellions and conquered civilizations across the stars. And tonight they were laughing. Not at a victory won. Not at a battle survived. But at something far more ridiculous. Human myths. The ridiculous myths of humanity. I swear to the war gods they actually believe this, one of the younger soldiers, Korik, said, his jagged teeth gleaming in the firelight. He tapped the holographic data pad floating before him, the glowing text flickering across his scaled fingers. Listen to this one, the Spartan 300. The other Kragath warriors leaned in. Korik grinned. A mere 300 human warriors held off an invading force of thousands. The camp erupted with laughter. A veteran soldier, Drashol, wiped a tear from his golden reptilian eye. 300? Against thousands? What did they fight with sharp rocks and their own arrogance? Korik shook his head, smirking. Close. They had bronze armor and spears. Another round of laughter shook the camp. This species is insane. I don't know whether to be disgusted or impressed. Imagine the sheer stupidity of it. What kind of primitive fools walk willingly into certain death? The holographic text scrolled down, revealing more of humanity's legends of impossible defiance. The Norse berserkers who fought even when covered in wounds. The kamikaze pilots who turned their own bodies into weapons. The siege of Stalingrad, where starving humans turned a ruined city into an unbreakable fortress. Every story seemed more ridiculous than the last, and the Kragath warriors laughed harder with each one, until the war hero spoke. The silence of the war hero. A deep voice cut through the laughter like a blade. It's not a joke. The camp fell deathly silent. Every Kragath warrior turned toward the voice. Seated on a stone, away from the fire, was General Varnake, the legendary commander of the Dominion's greatest conquests. His scars were ancient, his eyes heavy with the weight of 1,000 wars. He had fought the best warriors the galaxy had ever known. And he was not laughing. Korik hesitated. General, you can't possibly believe these myths? Varnake's golden eyes gleamed in the firelight. They are not myths. A cold shudder passed through the younger warriors. Because Varnake did not tell stories. Varnake told truths. And tonight, the truth would change everything. The battle no one speaks of. Varnake's clawed fingers tightened into a fist. He stood slowly, his movements heavy with old wounds and darker memories. You call it stupidity? His voice was low, filled with something no Kragath warrior had ever heard before. Not anger. Not pride. Not amusement. Fear. You think humans fight because they are foolish. You think they rush toward death because they do not know better. Varnake turned, his gaze settling on each warrior in the circle. You could not be more wrong. The fire crackled, casting eerie shadows across his battle-scarred scales. I have seen them fight. The younger warriors shifted uneasily. Korik narrowed his eyes. You have fought them? The humans? Varnake nodded once. And the camp grew so quiet that even the wind dared not whisper. Because no one spoke of that war. No one dared. The first and only defeat. Varnake's voice was steady, but beneath it there was something else. Something none of them had ever heard before in their mighty war hero. A tremor. It was on a nameless moon. His eyes drifted to the fire as if seeing something else. Something distant. Something horrifying. The Dominion was advancing across the Orion sector. We expected the humans to surrender. He exhaled slowly, the sound almost like a growl. They didn't. The warriors leaned forward. We outnumbered them 5-1. Korik smirked. Let me guess. They fought like demigods and defied the odds? Varnake's golden eyes locked onto him. They did something worse. The smirk vanished. Varnake's claws tightened around the hilt of his ceremonial dagger. We thought they would fight like any other species. His voice dropped to a whisper. They didn't. The fire crackled, flickering against the silent, waiting faces of the Kragath warriors. Varnake's next words sent a cold chill through them all. They smiled? The moment that changed everything. Korik blinked. They smiled? Varnake's jaw tightened. Yes. His voice was barely more than a breath now. As we advanced, as we slaughtered their soldiers, as we burned their cities. He swallowed as if the words themselves were poison. They smiled? The Kragath warriors shifted uneasily. This was wrong. They had fought countless species. They had conquered countless worlds. But no warrior, no being, should ever smile in the face of annihilation. And yet, Varnake had seen it. They did not fear us. His voice was shaking now. Even when we thought they were broken. Even when we thought they had nothing left. They just kept smiling. A deathly silence consumed the camp. The warriors no longer laughed. Because this was not a story. This was a warning. The last words of a dying human. Varnake took a slow breath, composing himself. I killed one of their commanders. His voice was hoarse, the weight of memory pressing against him. As he lay there bleeding out, I asked him, "Why do your people fight like this?" The fire crackled softly. And then Varnake spoke the words the human had whispered with his last breath. Because we don't know how to stop. His gaze lifted, meeting the horrified stares of his soldiers. And that, my warriors, is why humanity will never lose. The fire burned low. The warriors no longer laughed. Because now they understood. And for the first time in their lives, the Kragath felt something they had never known before. Something that no species in the Dominion had ever dared feel toward humanity. Fear. The fire crackled, sending orange embers into the cold night air. But none of the Kragath warriors spoke. The laughter had died. Their commander, General Varnake, had just told them something they were never meant to hear. A story about humans. About the way they fought. About the way they smiled in war. And now, for the first time in their hardened warrior lives, the Kragath felt fear. The truth they were never taught. Korik, the young soldier who had been mocking humanity's myths, shifted uncomfortably. His earlier arrogance was gone. He glanced at his fellow warriors. Their expressions had changed too. The Kragath were not supposed to fear. Yet the weight of Varnake's words pressed down on them like a crushing stone. Korik swallowed hard. General? He hesitated, forcing the words past his tightening throat. Tell us the rest. Varnake's gaze was distant, his mind still trapped in memories of that terrible battle. He exhaled. And then he spoke. The Battle of Black Sky Ridge. It happened on the moon of Xiphon 7. The warriors listened in silence. We had crushed the human forces in the sector. Their fleets were broken. Their colonies in flames. All that remained was a final stronghold. A mountain fortress the humans called Black Sky Ridge. Varnake's claws tightened into fists. We believed it would be easy. A final battle. A quick extermination. His golden reptilian eyes darkened. We were wrong. The warriors leaned in, tension thick in the air. Varnake's voice dropped to a near whisper. The humans did not fight to win. A cold shiver ran through the warriors. Then why did they fight? Korik asked, his voice barely above a breath. Varnake's jaw tightened. To see how many of us they could take with them. The moment the war changed. The Kragath war strategy was simple. Conquer. Dominate. Break the enemy. It had worked for thousands of years. Until Black Sky Ridge. We had them surrounded, Varnake continued, his voice heavy. Their supplies were gone. They had no reinforcements. No chance of victory. He exhaled slowly as if trying to push the memory away. And yet, they attacked us. The Kragath warriors stiffened. This made no sense. A species that knew it would lose should have surrendered. Or at least waited to be wiped out. But not humans. They charged. Not out of desperation. Not out of madness. But because they wanted to. They fought as if dying was just an inconvenience. Varnake clenched his claws. They came at us in waves, laughing, shouting. Some of them even wounded, bleeding, still fighting. The warriors said nothing. Their war hero was shaking. Not with rage. With something else. The warriors that would not break. Varnake's eyes flickered toward the fire. As if he could still see them. The humans. Fighting. Smiling. Dying, but never surrendering. I remember one, he murmured. The camp fell silent again. A human soldier. A female. One of their leaders. Varnake's voice was slow, filled with something almost like reverence. She had been shot twice. Her armor was shattered. She could barely stand. His golden eyes lifted, scanning his warriors. And she still tried to kill me? The Kragath warriors tensed. Korik's jaw clenched. You mean, she refused to surrender? Varnake let out a humorless chuckle. Surrender? No. She wasn't even trying to survive. She was trying to take me with her. His claws tightened. Her face was covered in blood. She could barely hold her weapon. But she still grinned at me. His voice lowered to a whisper. And then she said something that haunts me to this day. The warriors leaned in, barely breathing. she said. Is that all you've got? The last stand of Black Sky Ridge. Vereneke's breathing was uneven now, because this was the part of the story that no one else knew. The part that the Dominion erased. The part that terrified him the most. We won the battle, he said quietly. The warriors exhaled, relieved. For a moment they thought there was no more to the story. Until Varneke spoke again. But we didn't break them. Korik's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Vereneke's eyes locked onto him. We killed every last human. The warriors nodded slowly. And then, Varneke spoke the words that shattered them. And yet, we were the ones who left the battlefield in fear. The humans never considered it a loss. The Kragath warriors stared in disbelief. How could a species be wiped out and still be the victors? Vereneke's voice was hoarse now. We expected them to beg for mercy. His golden eyes darkened. They laughed instead. The warriors sat frozen. Vereneke's voice dropped to a whisper. The last surviving human stood on the ridge. He was alone, bleeding, surrounded by my forces. The fire crackled. He knew he was going to die. Vereneke's jaw tightened, and he just smiled and said, he swallowed. Then he spoke the last words of the last human soldier on Black Sky Ridge. See you soon. Silence. The fire burned lower. The warriors said nothing, because now they understood. The humans did not fear war. They did not fear death. They did not fight to win. They fought to destroy the very idea of losing. And that was something the Kragath had never prepared for. The lesson of the war hero. Varneke turned away from the fire. He did not need to say more. The truth was already there, hanging in the air like the smoke of the dying embers. Humanity was not stronger. They were not faster. They were not more advanced. But they were something far more terrifying. They were inevitable. And in war, nothing is more dangerous than an enemy who refuses to accept that they've lost. The warriors stared at the fire. The flames flickered, whispering secrets only the wind could hear. And then slowly, one by one, they stopped laughing. The fire had burned low, its embers casting long shadows across the war camp. The laughter was gone. The Kragath warriors sat motionless, their scales glinting under the flickering light. They had listened to General Vereneke's story. And now, for the first time in their history, they understood something that no Kragath was ever meant to know. Humans did not fear war. They did not see battles as victories or losses. They saw them as something else entirely. And that terrified them. The warrior who spoke the unthinkable. Korik, the once arrogant soldier who had laughed at humanity's myths, was no longer smirking. His claws twitched against the metal of his gauntlet. He swallowed. Then slowly he spoke. General? Varneke turned, his golden eyes gleaming in the firelight. Yes. Korik hesitated. His mind screamed at him to stop, to stay silent, to not ask the question that had now rooted itself inside his soul. But he could not. Because now he needed to know. What if they are still fighting? The air grew colder. The fire flickered. The warriors shifted uncomfortably. One of them snorted, trying to brush the thought away. That's impossible. We wiped them out. Varneke remained silent. Korik's voice was quieter now. But did we? The wind howled across the war camp. And none of them could look each other in the eye. The truth of the endless war. Varneke stared into the fire for a long time. Then finally he spoke. You are right to be afraid. Korik's throat tightened. Vereneke's voice was low, almost reverent now. Because the war never ended. The warriors froze. One of them, Jaxer, a veteran of the Dominion Wars, spoke up, his voice uncertain. That makes no sense. The humans lost. We destroyed their final stronghold. Their civilization was broken. Varneke exhaled slowly. That is what we were told. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. But that is not the truth. The humans were planning their next war before this one even ended. Vereneke's claws traced the edge of his blade, the memories clawing their way to the surface. Before we delivered the final blow on Black Sky Ridge, the humans did something unexpected. Korik frowned. They charged into battle, didn't they? Varneke shook his head. Not just that. His voice dropped lower. They sent messages. The warriors exchanged uneasy glances. Messages? Vereneke's jaw tightened. To where we do not know. The fire crackled. But they sent them, before they died. A cold shiver ran through the warriors. Korik's voice was hoarse now. What did the messages say? Vereneke's claws tightened. His next words sent a ripple of unease through the entire camp. They said, see you soon. The fire dimmed as if the words themselves had stolen its warmth. And for the first time in his life, Korik understood what true fear felt like. The chilling rumor about humanity. Jaxer, the veteran warrior, spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. But that was years ago. No humans remain. Vareneke's silence was deafening. Korik's mind raced. The humans never believed in defeat the way other species did. They fought not to win battles, but to win wars. Wars that did not end just because one battlefield was lost. A horrifying thought entered his mind. What if they are waiting? Varneke met his gaze. And in that moment, Korik knew the answer. The ghost ships in the Outer Rim. The Dominion controlled thousands of star systems. But there were places even they feared to go. Dark regions of space where something lurked. Ships had disappeared in those regions. Scouts had vanished without a trace. And the only thing left behind? Strange signals. Distorted. Untraceable. Some said it was static. Others believed it was a malfunction. But now Korik knew better. He looked at Varne, his voice barely a whisper. The missing ships. You think it's them? Vareneke's expression was unreadable. I know it's them. A deadly silence spread through the camp. Because if that were true, then the war was not over. It had never been over. Humanity was still out there. Watching. Waiting. Preparing. The message that shook the Dominion. Korik swallowed hard. How do you know? Vareneke hesitated. Then finally he stood. And activated his holopad. A faint signal appeared, a transmission that should not exist. The warriors leaned in, confused. What is this? Jaxer muttered. Vareneke's voice was grim. Something we intercepted near the Outer Rim. Something the Dominion does not want us to know about. The holopad flickered. A transmission played. At first it was just static. Then, a voice. A human voice. Ragged. Unbroken. And whispering a single phrase. See you soon. The firelight dimmed. The warriors did not move. Did not breathe. Did not speak. Because in that moment they all realized the terrible truth. Humanity had never been defeated. They had never stopped fighting. They were still out there. And the worst part? They had been waiting. The final warning. Varneke turned to his warriors. His voice was calm but heavy. This is why we were never meant to know the truth. The warriors remained silent. Because now they understood. The reason humans fought the way they did. The reason they smiled in battle. The reason they never begged for mercy. It was never about winning a single war. It was about teaching their enemies something they would never forget. And now, across the stars in the deepest voids of space, something was waiting. Something that had not forgotten. Something that was coming back. And when it did, the Dominion would finally understand what it meant to lose. For real this time. The fire had burned out. But the cold that remained was far worse. The Kragath warriors sat in stunned silence, their minds unable to process the horror they had just heard. Humanity had never surrendered. They had never been defeated. They had simply disappeared, waiting, watching, preparing. And now they were coming back. The message that should not exist. The holopad in General Vareneke's claws was still active. The transmission, the one the Dominion had tried to bury, flickered across its surface. A voice. Human. Unbroken. Unafraid. See you soon. Korik's throat was dry. His claws dug into the dirt beneath him as if trying to ground himself in something real. When was this intercepted? He asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Vareneke exhaled slowly. 5 cycles ago. The warriors tensed. 5 cycles. That was nothing. That was yesterday. That was now. The vanishing fleet. The Kragath war camp was silent, but the air around them hummed with unspoken terror. Then another holopad beeped. A priority transmission. The insignia of the Dominion High Command flashed across the screen. Vareneke's golden eyes narrowed. He tapped the screen. A grainy, urgent broadcast played. This is Admiral Kazul of the Dominion's 12th Fleet, requesting immediate reinforcements. Static. Outer Rim, unexpected contact, ships disappearing. More static. A sound. Not a distress call. Not a scream. But something far worse. Laughter. Human laughter. And then, silence. The transmission cut out. And the war camp felt smaller than it had before. The return of the ghost. Vareneke stood slowly. The embers of the fire glowed faintly, reflecting in his hardened golden eyes. His voice was calm, but beneath it was something colder than fear. They are already here. The warriors stared in disbelief. Jaxer, the veteran soldier, shook his head. That's not possible. We control the outer rim. Varanake's eyes did not waver. No. His next words sent a chill down every warrior's spine. We only thought we did. Korik's claws tightened into fists. He looked at Varnake, his voice almost desperate. Then what do we do? Varnake closed his eyes. And for the first time he did not have an answer. The war that had never stopped. Across the Dominion, the first reports began to surface. Ships disappearing without a trace. Listening posts going silent. Fleet movements disrupted by an unseen enemy. No wreckage. No distress signals. No survivors. The Dominion was not under attack. They were being hunted. And then the final sign appeared. A single Dominion warship, a Dreadnought-class battleship, was found adrift in deep space. It had not been damaged. Its crew had not been killed. It had simply been left behind. Every system still intact. Every weapon still armed. Every escape pod untouched. But there was no one inside. No bodies. No blood. No signs of struggle. Only a single message, scrawled in human script across the central command screen. See you soon. The Dominion's last mistake. Panic spread through the Dominion. High Command issued emergency protocols. War fleets were mobilized. Every remaining stronghold was put on high alert. And yet, it was too late. Because humanity had never stopped fighting. And the moment the Dominion believed the war was over, was the moment they had already lost. The first battle of the new war. The first true attack came days later. A Dominion supply convoy heavily guarded, traveling through a secured sector. And then, without warning, the humans arrived. Not in ships the Dominion recognized. Not in fleets that could be tracked. They came from the void itself. Dark warships, sleek and silent, emerging from nowhere, moving in impossible formations. They did not hail. They did not negotiate. They simply opened fire. And in minutes the convoy was gone. Not destroyed. Taken. Vanished into the blackness of space, like ghosts returning to reclaim what was theirs. The end of Dominion supremacy. High Command tried to cover it up. They tried to downplay the losses. But the truth was already out. And soon something far worse happened. Other species, those who had suffered under Dominion rule, began to hear the rumors. The ghosts of humanity had returned. And with them an opportunity. An opportunity for revenge. Rebellions began to rise. Systems once under complete Dominion control began slipping away. Not because humanity was leading them, but because the fear of humanity had already done the work for them. The Dominion's true power had never been their fleets or their technology. It had been the fear they instilled in others. But now they were the ones afraid. And that meant, the Dominion was already dead. The last war hero's final words. Back in the war camp, the Kragath warriors stood in horrified silence. Everything they had been taught, everything they had believed about war was a lie. Korik swallowed, his throat dry. So what do we do now? Varnake exhaled. Then he spoke the last words he would ever say to his warriors. Pray they do not remember our names. Epilogue, the last transmission. Somewhere in the cold void of deep space, a final message was broadcast. Not just to the Dominion, but to everyone. A signal that reached every empire, every species, every government that had once thought humanity was gone. The words were simple and chilling. You thought we were myths. Pause. You thought we were gone. Another pause. We're not. And then, a final whisper. See you soon. And just like that, the war truly began.